Okay.
Hello, namaste. How are you?
I'm good.
It's good to see you. It's good to be doing this
Together.
together in the studio.
Zoom in it.
I know.
I'm like Zoom edit.
Yeah, let's make the best use of this until.
Yeah.
All right. So what do we have for this month, Austin? What is the topic of the month?
So this topic is called Becoming an Eternal Student. And we're studying a sloka from chapter 4, sloka number 34 of Bhagavad Gita, which is the chapter on Jnana Yoga, the yoga of knowledge.
Shall I chant it?
I would love for you to chant it.
Tattvidhi pranipatena pariprashnena sevaya upadekshanti te jnanam jnanistattvadarshinaha. So what does this mean, Austin?
So my interpretation of this, because we have a new channel coming out. It's going to come out. It's going to be on Amazon with a lot of Bhagavad Gita slokas in it and mantras. And so my interpretation of this mantra is: when you offer respect, provide service, and ask sincerely formed questions, highly knowledgeable and spiritual teachers will enlighten you with truth.
I love it. What was the genesis of, where did this shloka come about? Like, who brought this into your consciousness?
So I was Yogeshri, my teacher Yogeshri was here from Chennai. One night he finished doing this long meditation, and he asked me to stay afterwards. He said, "Do you have any questions?" And I froze up. I said, "No." I said, "I don't have any questions." And he was like, "You don't?" And I was like, "No." And he said, "Okay." And so afterwards I thought, wow, I should have asked him something, but I didn't want to ask a stupid question. I didn't want to ask the wrong question. I was like, what should I have asked? And all this stuff was going through my head, like, why should I have asked this? Like, an amazing, knowledgeable person who's been studying with so many wonderful people, and being that himself is like, teaching all these people. And I kind of felt like I had missed an opportunity to really ask something important. And it was about 6 months later, and I was watching one of the recorded sessions from Chennai, and he mentioned this sloka, and he said, it says in the Gita that, if you don't ask me questions, I can't give you answers. He said, a student has to ask questions. And when he said that, I thought, oh my God, I find a sloka. So, and he did mention it was chapter 4. So I pulled out my Gita, and I'm reading all of chapter 4, and I've skimmed through. It's actually been good because it's forced me to read the whole Gita instead of just kind of cherry picking like I used to do when I was with the other method of yoga that I practiced. And so I found the sloka, and when I read it, I thought, wow, this is so powerful because it actually is asking me to do everything that I was told not to do.
I love this. And so I want to double click on that a little bit more as well, because I didn't study the Gita end to end, but I studied a few verses. But the image of Krishna sitting on his chariot and Arjuna asking him this question, and the back and forth between them, this very formalized discourse-based investigation has always stuck in my mind when I was a child. So do you want to talk a little bit about Krishna and Arjuna and how that is set up in this Q&A, this question and answer, and how this falls into...
Well, I think we can go back further. Okay. I think we can even go back to the fact that, if you look at the yoga tradition, as far back as you can, even to the Upanishads, all of the Upanishads are question and answer. It's discourse, Q&A, either between a father and a child, or a mother and a child, or a teacher and a student. There's even a Upanishad where it's Yama, the Lord of Death, and somebody who has followed him and has all these questions about what happens after life, but it's a question and answer. It's always question and answer. Almost all of them are question and answers.
How is it different from the Socratic method of inquiry, for instance, like the Western tradition?
So Western tradition is it's not a discourse, it's a lecture, right? The teacher gets up there, they teach a lecture. They may say, is there any questions at the end of the lecture? And, you better have the right question. You better have a question that is a smart, intelligent question that the teacher likes. Or you could be embarrassed. You could really be put into your place. That was the kind of training I went through college with, and also when I first started practicing yoga, I was practicing with people who had, grew up Irish Catholic, and it was a very if you asked them a question, if they didn't like the question, they kind of humiliated you, and embarrassed you, or ignored you because you were asking a question. One of the things that I noticed about yoga, I'll tell you this story about yoga. So I was actually with him at one of his sessions he was having here, and he was talking about diet, and he was talking about how that people should eat. He said, look, when you eat your food, don't drink water all through the meal. He said it breaks down the digestive juices, and your meal isn't absorbed, the nutrition isn't absorbed well. And a young lady rose her hand. She said, sir, can you tell me, are you telling us not to have soup? Now, when she asked that, I thought, are you kidding me? Like, are you asking that question? Like, I had a very Western idea. And he was so loving and he was so kind. He was like, no, I don't mean that. And he kind of laughed, he kind of chuckled. And he said, soup is the full digestive food. He said, I'm saying don't drink water when you have your meal. Don't water down that food. And she was like, oh, okay. But when I watched him do that, I thought, how would my teachers have responded to that? They would have, probably have responded to it with rolling their eyes, maybe kind of being dismissive and not answering. And I saw something very different happen. And obviously, she was asking a question from the point of view that she was at. Like, she was asking a sincere question.
Yeah, he was meeting the student where she was.
Meeting the student where she was.
Right. It's interesting, I must say that, as you know, I grew up in India, and the schooling system in India is, at least when I was growing up, was very punishing.
Oh, really?
Literally punishing. What I mean by that is, you had to, when you answered, or when you raised your hand in class, you had to have a good question. And secondly, the consequences of not having smart questions or answering incorrectly were also sometimes scary for a little child. So I grew up with about 12 years worth of this in front of my head where you better be good with your questions, because your question is a reflection of who you are and how smart you are. And I'm curious as to whether you had something similar growing up in that kind of Methodist practicing background, right?
Absolutely. That if you didn't ask really smart questions, you were chastised. You were made fun of. It also, like you just said, it pointed out your intellectual level.
Yeah.
And if you answered wrongly, if you were asked a question, then it was a negative reflection on you. And I think the thing is that, that happens a lot of times in academia. But yoga isn't academia. And when we talk about jnana, which is this yoga of knowledge, we're not talking about book knowledge. We're talking about an internal knowledge. And everybody is going to be at a different level, and you're going to have a room filled with practitioners at different levels. That's always been the case. So spiritual teachers have always known that they have to meet the student where they are when the student asks a specific question. It's not like they're all in the 12th grade that year.
Right. So I'm curious that you've run this incredible yoga studio in Jersey City, and you've seen multiple apprentices go through, both from your old lineage and now the school that you're running. What has been your own progression in your own patience and in your own
That's a good question.
expansiveness as a teacher?
Um,
And some of the mistakes you made early on, I'm sure you had, right?
well, I think one of the biggest changes is that, with Yogashri becoming my teacher, I was able to get rid of some of the dogmatic tendencies of my prior teachers. The idea that kind of Irish Catholic, kind of get it right or else kind of thing. And it has been interesting because we now are training teachers that are not from the same lineage originally. So you get a bigger spectrum of what people come in with, their knowledge of either asana or even the text, or so I've had to kind of really expand and embrace like more, being more generous with like what something can be and how it can develop. Does that make sense?
That totally makes sense, actually. I also think that just knowing some of your students or knowing some of the apprentices, having been a student here and being on the receiving end of many different kinds of backgrounds and many different kinds of pedagogies, many different kinds of relationship with Sanskrit, the root scriptures, many different kinds of curiosity. It's always been fascinating to me to watch what is the thread that ties all your teachers together.
Yes.
Because many of them, a lot of them don't really have knowledge of Sanskrit. A lot of them have not read anything about the scriptures or the yogic tradition. For me personally, and I'm Indian by origin, but I'm American by training, I guess, it is that innocence actually. I don't want to use the word innocence in a condescending way. It's almost that beginner's mind, and the point of starting where they're starting from almost a zero base, which actually has been profound because it erases some of the dogma.
It does, and I think that especially when you're talking about coming into a tradition that you're learning a new language, you're learning a new, like I said, the title of this is becoming the eternal student. It's not just you're becoming a student of yoga asana, you're becoming an eternal student, and you're looking not at the world from a different point of view, but the universe from a different point of view, and rethinking and re-educating yourself. And so sometimes you have people on that journey and they're already 55 years old.
Yeah.
And you have to be loving with those people on that journey.
Yeah. I love the word loving because I think it is intimidating to teach. And you know that I was trained a long time ago under Brett Howard
in Pilates.
And I remember going through my 600-hour teacher's training. I remember being like, I cannot believe that the most obvious set of exercises that I've done for the last 5 years, now that I'm a teacher and having to break that down into a series of movements and having to then finish that internal comprehension and translate it in a way where the receiver is able to digest it and then internalize it themselves. It's actually very complex. It's very complex, and I think the act of learning to become a teacher and the act of investigating pedagogy was one of the most humbling experiences for me. And I think I remember this, after spending it took me 2 years to finish my Pilates training, I became a better communicator, and I became a better sensor and listener.
Yes. And I think that's, it's also very interesting, to talk about, because there's so many yoga teacher trainings and teacher trainings like Pilates in America right now. There's so many people who are doing them. But also, it's really interesting, and a lot of times we make the mistake of focusing our yoga on that. But actually, I think where we get lost in Western yoga right now is that we should be encouraging the student who is coming to actually be inquisitive and have that beginner mind like you were talking about. And but also we have to train the young teacher to know that if they don't have an answer, it's okay to say to somebody who's asking you a hard question, I don't know. I'll get back to you.
Yeah. In that space of vulnerability, I actually think it opens up, it's a space of trust. I think if I had a teacher up front telling me that I don't know, I actually would respect the teacher even more. I would in fact feel more confident in coming back to class because you know that this person's not a bullshit.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, and it's hard to make the student that's asking the question feel bad that they're asking the question. You know, I've seen that happen too.
Or the shaming. I've been on the other side of that actually. And I mean, thankfully, no one in our studio, but I've had teachers that have made me look bad. I felt bad. I'm not saying they make me look bad. The way, like for instance, I'll give you the example of I was in a uni class. And I hate working with those straps. I'm sorry. Something in my, I think I'm dyslexic actually with a, you can walk me through knotting that strap 20 times. Right. And I'll still show up in class every single time and I'll be like, Austin, can you show me how to do it? And I remember like one of those classes, one of the teachers got very fresh with me. Yeah. And I stopped going.
Right.
You know, because I think we don't show up to class to be reminded of our, we are all kind of far from perfect, but to feel shame. In that sense, it's not really it's not very encouraging. Yeah. I'm going to change gears for just a second, which is to talk about Svadhyaya.
Okay.
And self-study, because you touched a bit about yoga being, it's a different school of knowledge. So do you want to talk a little bit about Svadhyaya?
Yes, I think one of the things in self-study, I think one of the key points that keeps coming back to this idea of jnana yoga is that, you know, when we talk about knowledge in yoga, there's two kinds of knowledge. There's book knowledge, right, and reading a book. So let's say I buy a book on Bali. I want to go to Bali. I know where Bali is on the map. You know, I can tell you all about like the beaches at Bali and which is the best hotels and which has 4-star ratings. But I've never been to Bali.
Yeah.
Then, you know, you have somebody who's gone to Bali and they've experienced Bali. And they know Bali because they've been to Bali.
Yeah.
And that's a different kind of knowledge. Yoga is that kind of knowledge. You can read about yoga, you can read the sloka, but until you actually experience the sloka, you don't know the sloka. You know. And then you know you meet the person who went to Bali and you say to them like, how was Bali? And you go, Bali was wonderful. And you go, yeah, but what was it like? How was it? And they go, it was wonderful, you have to go. And they can't put it into words because it's the self-knowledge that they know. That's Svadhyaya.
Yeah,
I've experienced it internally. I know it. I've studied it. I can't even describe it to you. It was wonderful. It's wonderful.
You know, it's interesting. I want to say, I can relate to it fully. I started practicing yoga in earnest, mostly through your studio. And before you opened, I was practicing yoga. So let's say for about 15 years, I've been practicing yoga. And at one point, I think I gave up Pilates to go into yoga. Right. Not because at that point in time, I think I was in a space of spiritual and emotional and moral inquiry. Right. And yoga was going to be the more direct discipline of facilitating me into it. And my relationship with the practice strengthened specifically between the years of 2012 to 2017. They were extraordinarily volatile years for me. Right. A lot was going on in my life, and I had therapy on Saturdays, and then I had my yoga practice during the week. And this idea of self-realization, and this idea of kind of coming to the class and the mat becoming the place where you literally journal, like, and insights. You ask questions, right. And then your body is bubbling up things. So the self-realization, I think, started for me in earnest with a combination of talk therapy, which is very popular, yeah, and then body therapy, or body-mind therapy, or body-mind-heart therapy, which became yoga for me. Starting with Pilates and Svadhyaya right now, because of the foundations of yoga, it's an eternal practice.
It's eternal, and I think that that's something that's very important to point out to people. While yoga asana is not Svadhyaya, it is the beginning of Svadhyaya. Yeah. The idea of alignment isn't to correct somebody, because there's different ways of teaching the same body alignment, the same asana. and telling people to do it 2 different ways. But it's about becoming aware of what the body is doing, which is a form of self-study. What is my back foot doing? What is my hand doing? Do I always kind of prop myself up on my thumb and my fingertips, or do I put my hand down? What's the difference in coming and propping myself up on my fingertips, and what's the difference in putting my hand down? It's self-study on a gross level.
Yeah.
And then that allows you.
How do you explain it was the body level?
The material level. It's a material level.
Yeah.
It's not that internal of setting with yourself and going inward and actually investigating things on a subtle level. So it's material experience. It's the difference between, reading the book about Bali and experience Bali and come back saying it's wonderful, I can't tell it to you. So and I think that's what people misunderstand about yoga alignment. Is yoga alignment? Because there's a lot of talk right now about whether teachers should even ask students to change the way their body is, or move their body around, move their hand around, put their foot down in a different way. Just let people do what they want to do. That's not svadhyaya. You can't introduce somebody to it if you're just letting them do habitual habits.
Yeah. They're not
going to ever take note of what they're doing. So yoga asana alignment is the mindfulness from the yoga world.
It is. I think we spoke about this in the vinyasa, right? The way you define the vinyasa. How did you define it? You said it's a mindful putting forth of it was a sequence.
It's a sequence of events that you are putting forth, intellectually or with purpose, or
exactly.
And it's thought out,
And when you introduce the breath practice, and both of us have had backgrounds in Ashtanga, where you have a very obvious breath practice.
Yes.
Right? You have the inhalation, the exhalation being very much the mantra and it's very symmetric.
Yeah.
When you introduce the breath, aren't you also then adding one level on top?
Svadhyaya. Are you breathing? But here again, it's the gross. Because you don't think about it, but even people who've been practicing for many, many years, you can walk by them and you'll have to say, breathe, don't forget to breathe. They'll come into an asana and they'll hold the asana and they'll hold their breath. You have to actually touch them and say, breathe. Don't forget to breathe. And they forget to breathe. And they're not connecting to that idea that the breath is actually a form of self-study. I'm coming into a stress position and I'm holding my breath. And my hamstrings are tight. I can't wait to get out of this. And so that goes back to the internal question. Am I breathing? Which doesn't sound like it's important, but it's actually the beginning of who am I? Beautiful. Why am I here? What is the purpose of this life? What is the purpose of being in this body? What's the purpose of having this mind? Beautiful. And that's what yoga does. That's why yoga asana is actually important for us. So that we can connect to those more subtle questions.
Yeah. For me, the yoga practice where it stands right now, it is a portal at a point in time for me to show up, for me to go through the connections between the breath, the body, the mind, and the spirit. So at that point in time, it's a vehicle. To your point on other points of self-realization and self-study, it continues as we all have to do.
Yeah, it continues off the map. It has to continue off. And that's why I think that yoga is transformation. I don't know if golf is transformation. I don't know if I played football in high school. I don't think football is transformational. I don't think it transforms who you are as a person.
If you would go back, let's talk about transformation. So let's go back to the earliest point. Let's say when you were in the acting career, you were in the theater profession, or worked on Broadway as a costume and set design, right? So let's go back to the asana then. Okay, give me like the persona.
Right.
And then tell me what was the asana as you became an apprentice first, and then the asana now. So let's take 3 points in time.
And 3 points in time. Okay, so I mean, the asana of when I was in theater, you know, I had to step up and be a showman. And I was very quick-witted. I was very quick-tongued. You know, I always had like a snappy, sarcastic line. When I was an apprentice, starting to study yoga, and I started my practice. I guess I was 42 years old. It took about a year. I started to question whether the personality that I had developed was the personality I should walk into the yoga room with.
Oh.
That it might not be appropriate.
So you had to do a stripping down of the persona.
I had to do a stripping down. And it wasn't hard because I was ready to give up. I was ready to move away from the theater. So I didn't know what to do.
Yeah.
I didn't know what that idea of what it was, who I was. And I actually at that point started a profound meditation practice.
And what does it look like?
And it looked like sitting there. And it was not a mindful, it wasn't a Buddhist practice, it was more like in a classical yoga Patanjali system of connecting to that idea of the self, of asking yourself, who am I? Why am I, who am I? It's over and over and over again. And reminding yourself, you're not the body, you're not the mind. You're not what you think you are, you're not the ego. And that shifted a lot for me.
What did it do for your heart, sis? Did you soften up?
No, I think I was always soft-hearted. I just always felt like I had to come back with a clever line. I mean, as a costume designer, you can't be a good costume designer with cold-hearted. So you have to be really
empathic.
Yeah, you have to. But I always thought I had to be funny. I always thought I had to be clever and funny.
Yeah.
And so, that was realizing that being funny in a yoga class was maybe not always the right approach.
Right.
That actually sometimes that people have, a different set of needs in a yoga class.
That's lovely. So I have the last question for you, which is, it's 2 questions, it's a 2-part question. The most philosophically, what drives your practice as a teacher when you're at this, like one key principle, and the second is, how is that influencing this beautiful teacher training program that you're setting up right now that we look forward to in 2022?
So one of the driving forces always in my practice is this idea of connecting to the eternal, or letting go of the finite and connecting to the infinite. And maybe it's also like just, I've done enough in my life, I feel like I can do that. That shift needs to happen. And that there are things that are more important than, what Fox News and CNN is talking about for the flavor of the day, or what's going on your Instagram account, or getting wrapped up in like the latest social media stuff. So like that was for me a big shift coming out of costume design. I used to follow all that pop culture stuff daily. I don't follow that kind of stuff anymore. I don't miss it. I actually have no idea what's going on half the time.
Me too.
And going into the teacher training, I want other people to be able to feel confident and comfortable in teaching about these more subtle spiritual teachings and not just focus on the chaotic energy that's out there right now and having been sucked down the rabbit hole with that.
Yeah. I see your studio as the studio that you and Bobby have created. I see it as a safe space sometimes in the sense of it's a little sanctuary from the noise, both figuratively and literally. And just to keep you a noisy place. But
It's a noisy place. It's connected. It's in biblical quote is the avant-garde going into New York City.
yeah.
You know.
Yeah, I can, even though I'm not a teacher, I hope to perhaps participate in the teacher's training in the future, but when I walk into the studio, the visceral sense that I get is of walking into a hermitage.
Yeah.
A sanctuary.
And that's
your brand.
That's the brand. And that's what I want other people to be able to offer people, because they need that right now. And I think that, I personally think that, yoga is going to go toward that. We've maxed out at the point where yoga can't be fitness classes anymore. That's been maxed out. The thing that's left to investigate in, especially American yoga, are these slokas like this, these eternal wisdom. That's the next frontier. Not external practices or external obsessions, I should say, not practices, external obsessions.
Well, and also I think the point that you bring up is that through the portal of the body and the body practice, we're entering a deeper and more original universe.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely.
So I loved what we've discussed today, and I look forward to teachers training that you're rolling out.
We'll be announcing it shortly. What we're probably going to do, a gateway teacher training first.
And what is that?
Hopefully it'll be after February we start.
And it's a 75-hour base.
It's a 75-hour foundational gateway into some of these ideas of what yoga can be without overwhelming a new student. And then we will be doing a 300-hour, which will be on a weekend for 3 months. And already we've started a 500-hour apprenticeship program.
Yeah. Exciting.
So we have apprentices here that were not from the lineage that I was trained in. They're from outside lineages, and but they're being introduced to these kind of teachings and how we teach here, which has been interesting. It's been very interesting to take somebody from another lineage that isn't your lineage and say, okay, when they're interested in your lineage and you're saying, okay, well, we say this differently or we do this differently than what your teacher wasn't wrong, that's their interpretation, this is this interpretation.
I love it.
It's very interesting to do that with people.
I love it, and I wanted to say in parting that you have been the most gorgeous reason for me to dive back into my history and the history of India and the mythology of India. You are more well-read on my culture than I am at this point, but I must say, coming to class, listening to the chants in the studio, the smell of incense, Ganesha in the entrance, and Shiva and Tanda, and having these gorgeous discussions with you where we dive deeply and very innocently and with great expansiveness.
And I actually think that's important. I think that that what you described physically here is a portal into allowing yourself to let down your guard when you come out of the street, like an urban area like this, and into a space like this. You need to actually go into a space that looks different and foreign from where you are, so that you can leave what you think you are as at the door. Yeah. It's very important. People don't understand that. They misinterpret it sometimes. I haven't had it here, but I think we're in a place where we talk a lot about cultural appropriation and things like that. And that is true, but when you're diving deep into these spiritual ideas. It's the same reason why the Catholic Church looks the way it does. The basilica looks the way it does because you need to walk into a space that feels like heaven.
Yeah, it's rituals.
You can't experience the eternal if it looks like the mall. You're going to experience the material. Right. So every tradition has known that if you want people to connect to the spiritual, you have to take them out of themselves. You gotta pick them up and translate them somewhere else.
I love it. Well, looking forward to joining you at the sanctuary of the Urban Sadhu.
Yes.
Once again, thank you.
I love that we're able to do this here now.
I know. I'm so excited. I look forward to October.
Thank you.
Thank you.